guys, 20 here and welcome back to Bordertown. In today's episode, I'm going to be working on the border crossing into Mexico. We did another border crossing a few episodes ago, the border crossing into the US, and I really loved that build, and there's going to be quite a lot more other border crossings in this series to come, but this one pretty much marks the end for like quite a few episodes. You know, now that we've sort of established two crossings into either city, I'm now going to start focusing on developing some of the suburbs, and then I'll start getting into the downtown areas for each city. So, you know, purely because I don't want to keep repeating myself, and, you know, building these things are kind of repetitive, but I do need at least 2 more entries into either one of the cities, just to make sure that traffic flows somewhat pretty good, and also just to keep that realism. And if you're wondering, well, this series is based on El Paso and Juarez. I'm sort of going on my own tangents. I'm pretty much just focusing on the roads and the structure of the two cities and just the basic inspiration, but I am generally going on my own inspiration for this area and taking a lot of ideas just from Texas and Mexico in general. So you'll probably see me do quite a few different things in this series that are not the same as either one of those cities. I generally like to kind of keep that formula, and by focusing on a particular area, it just helps to kind of keep me on track with realism. I've done other series in the past, and I've just taken inspiration from many other places, and the idea of the city just gets lost because it's not exactly, you know, doesn't represent any particular area. So in this episode, I'm going to be building pretty much just the crossing. The structure of this building is going to be quite different to the one leading into the US. I wanted to follow a slightly different structure, a different style of building, and also make a bit more of a focus on the foot traffic coming into Mexico, because I do find it really fascinating that you can just walk across a bridge and make your way into a different country. I think that's quite cool. I know that's common everywhere, but I think just having the bridge element is really interesting. So I'm going to be focusing a lot on the foot traffic area. And also I'm going to be taking a lot of the ideas that you guys suggested in the last border crossing video, and I'm going to be implementing it into this episode. For instance, I'm going to be placing down areas for cars to pull over and have their cars checked. And I'm going to be also placing down a lot of lights, because a lot of the people are saying that these checkpoints are just lit up all the time, really big lights, so I've also included that. And I'm also hoping to get a lot more traffic flow coming through this one, but something that I said in the last one is that we won't start seeing a lot of cars banked up until the cities are more set up. We're not going to be seeing it until we have more of a population. At the moment, it's pretty much just tourists going from either one. A lot of the cars that are driving through are people who are going from one side of the map to the other, but when we actually have a big population, people are going to be going in and out of these checkpoints quite a lot. And when they start using different roads as well, that's when you're going to see them really start using each lane. And I'm pretty confident about that, and I'm really excited to actually see that happen, because I think it's going to look really awesome. But some of the things that I've been working on right now is I've just basically placed down these buildings, and I'm going with a different technique, and I'm creating my own actual awning structure. These are just ploppable. I think they actually might be part of a pedestrian path assets pack or something like that, and I've just created my own roof and added my own props as you know, just to create a different surface on the top, because they are quite bland on the top, so I figured they needed to be a little bit different. And you've also seen me put down a vanilla building in between the two awnings, and that's a bit of an administration building. There's going to be a couple of them around here. Pretty much all the buildings that are going to be situated around this border crossing are going to be administration buildings that are going to serve this area. And then that's going to be pretty much it for this area. Then we're going to pretty much move on to other places, because I would like a bit of a change in styles of building. Pretty much at that stage where I want to start branching out into different areas of Las Palmas and Juarez. In terms of the roads that I've been placing down, these are highways. and of course the highway speed is quite fast. So I've used traffic precedents to slow down the traffic speed, and I've also placed down an intersection just underneath these checkpoints so that cars will stop there momentarily and then they'll proceed. And that way it looks like people are actually stopping for their bags to be checked and their passports to be stamped, and then they're on their way. And eventually we're going to be seeing quite a lot of traffic banked here, which is not going to be great for, I guess, the way that the city functions, but in terms of aesthetics, I think it's going to look awesome. And the type of roads that I've got here as well are, I've tried to create a couple of different lanes for different services. So there's a road that you can see pretty much on the left is designated for vehicles who have the Nexus or the Sentry Pass. That's pretty much a pass that lets you get into either one of the countries on a much faster route. It's an extra, you have to pay for that pass, and it's pretty much for people who are, have business and they travel there frequently, so that rather than having to wait in the long lines, they can just actually go straight, pretty much straight through. And I've been calling it Nexus, but it's actually Sentry, the one that's used in Mexico border. However, there's only a sign for Nexus, so I'm going to keep on using that sign until someone, fingers crossed, somebody makes a Sentry sign. But to be honest, it doesn't really matter. It's still fictional, so we're just going for whatever. And so there's that road that's got its own path along. Then I've also got 3 lanes that are designated just for vehicles getting into Mexico. And then there's also a bus and a truck entrance, which is on the far right. And I'll also use traffic precedents to make sure that that actually works in that manner, so that vehicles only go through one entrance and buses and trucks only go through the other. And something really cool that somebody mentioned is that basically I want to make sure that the US service vehicles stay on the US side, so all the police and all the fire services stay on one side, and then all the Mexican vehicles stay on the other side. And that way we've got like a really clear indication of what police units look like in Mexico and police units look in the US. And somebody's come up with a really great idea to just designate certain vehicles for particular police stations and for fire stations. There's a mod that actually allows you to do that. It means that they just only spawn a one particular type of vehicle. And then if I restrict all access to service vehicles on these bridges, then that'll make sure that they only stay on their side, which is going to be really cool. So then that means when you start seeing more cinematics of the cities, you're going to be able to see a particular type of vehicle used in one side of the country, and then on the other side of the border you're going to see another type, which is very, very cool. So that's something I'm going to be implementing a little bit further on down the track. And speaking of service vehicles, Celsius, he's an asset creator who creates all sorts of vehicles on the workshop. He's kindly put up his hand and has started creating some vehicles for this series, which is really exciting. He's got a border patrol service vehicle that's going to be patrolling the borders around here, which is going to be awesome. He's got a Las Palmas police. He's actually looking for somebody who is interested in creating the badge for the Las Palmas police, or even if you want to create the badge for all the vehicles in Bordertown, then go for it. So if you're interested in that, go and ask me on Discord, and I'll forward you his information. But yeah, he's working really hard in creating some really great assets, and you will potentially see them driving around in this series. In this episode. I'm not quite sure if I enabled them in this in the cinematics at the end. You can see some vehicles that are placed down. I've placed them down already. They're not his ones. They were just some placeholders until I did have my own vehicles driving around. So that's very cool. I've actually got quite a lot of different asset creators jumping on board in this series. Beard Monkey's also jumped on board. I'll be using some of his buildings in the next episode. Actually, the whole of next episode is primarily using some Mexican buildings that he's been working pretty hard at. So that's a great episode to come, and they'll be on the workshop too pretty shortly. And if you are interested, if you are an asset creator and inspired by this series, then jump on board, because I'm going to definitely need your help somewhere down the track, because it's quite a unique series. And I guess on the same topic, we are still looking for people to create billboards for the series. Pretty much if you are inspired by the series and you'd like to create some sort of custom image that will be presented on a billboard or on the side of a building in this series, then jump onto Discord, because we are pretty much uploading any images that are inspired by the series, that have a Mexican theme, that have a Texas theme, that have a really strong US theme to them. Then create something using that idea and post it to Discord, and pretty much they will end up being created into a billboard or something to be put on the side of a building. We have that Evan, who is an asset creator. He's going to be creating billboards out of those images to be placed around this series, and Ganuk is also somebody who is going to be building some custom signs to be going on the side of buildings. So pretty much if you want to advertise your own series, or your name, or you want to create a law firm, or you know how to speak Spanish and you'd like to create a poster to go on the side of a building, or advertise a business in the city or on either side, and it's super easy. Just jump into Photoshop or jump into Paint or whatever you end up using, follow the guidelines and upload it like that. And you know, if it's of pretty good quality, if it follows the guidelines, if it looks like a billboard, if it looks like it belongs in Las Palmas or in Juarez, then it's going to be created into a prop. But pretty much, if you've got any questions, just feel free to ask me on the comment section or in Discord. And happy creating. They're already really fantastic, so I'm looking forward to seeing what else people come up with. But what I'm doing at the moment on screen, I've done quite a lot actually, and I better backtrack and talk about that. I've just started creating that footbridge that I was talking about before. I really love the way this thing turned out. I love that it's got this multi-layer, and I've sort of followed the one in Juarez as well. That's, you know, this raised bridge, and then it has this like concrete wall, and these retaining walls really work nicely for that. And there's quite a lot of security for that footbridge too. So there's these high fences that stop people from gaining access into the Mexico without going through the actual checkpoint. So you know, I wanted to make sure that it's sort of totally tight, you know, that there's pretty much no access at all, staying true to that. If you see any holes, then let me know and I'll fix them up. But I do love the way that this bridge sits over the top of this car park, and this car park is kind of a little bit unusual shaped, but I think it turned out pretty nicely, even though it was a little bit tricky to piece together. And down below here is just like a bit of a storage facility, an area where I guess trucks will come in and make some deliveries for the border offices around this area. I also really love this rock retaining wall that I just created using Strictoster's seawalls that I use for pretty much everything. And this whole facility runs along this highway that pretty much stretches all along the border through Mexico. And I'm gonna keep this this road quite distant from a lot of other places around this area, because it's sort of this highway that is just really restricted only for the highway. There's pretty much nobody else walking around this area. I'll probably have a couple of parks, and then there'll be the river on the other side, and that's pretty much it. There'll probably be like no houses along this area, and it's going to be pretty much just this road. And I really love this road. I'm hoping that we're going to be seeing quite a lot more cars driving through it. We're actually already starting to see a lot more cars driving around. The population is slowly, oh, looking at it now, it's got 60 people. It's dropped. I think last episode I said there's like 2,000 and now there's 50. That's not great. But in the next episode, I placed down a ridiculous amount of houses in the Mexican side. And I think in the next one after that, I'll probably end up doing something residential based on the US as well. Just so I can balance it out, get a bit of a population on either side. And I think I actually mentioned last episode that this is probably my least favorite style of building a city, because at the moment it's, you know, it's obviously very eye candy, it's very realistic, it looks great, however it's very disjointed. It doesn't, like, you know, as soon as I zoom out it doesn't look like a city basically. It looks like just two random sides of the river, and there's massive gaps. It's not going to start looking like a city until I start getting more houses in and when I start getting the downtown built. And so, you know, we've got a bit of progress to make. I'm still very inspired by the series. I'm playing it quite a lot and I'm working on it quite a lot. So there's still a lot to do, which is exciting. You know, I don't really want this series to be very short or tiny. I do want to be working on it as much as I'm inspired to, and then we'll jump back into Springwood and we'll start working on that. Yes, Springwood is not dead. Those people who were here from all my other series, I know I've gained quite a lot of subscribers since starting Bordertown, but I do have another series, Springwood. If you haven't seen it, go and check that one out. It's one of my more popular ones. A lot of people are here from it, and it's basically a US style city with left-hand driving, set in the 80s, based on LA, based on Sydney, based on just a whole bunch of different countries, a whole bunch of different cities. But it's a cool little series that I got going. It's not literal at all, it's absolutely massive. And that will be returning, but I am just taking a massive break from it because I am just crazy inspired by Bordertown at the moment. So I think you've got to chase your inspiration, and you know, when I start getting a little bit burnt out with this one, I'll definitely jump back into Springwood. So don't worry, it'll be back, and so will Down Under, my other series based in Australia, that'll be back too. But anyway, what I am doing something quite unique, something quite different, and this is something that I noticed when I was flying over on Earth. I'm pretty sure this is like a screening check for buses and for trucks. I don't really know exactly how this works, and that's why I'm just pretty much basing it off the structure of it and figuring out how this thing looks. And then if I figure out how it looks, then it's probably somewhat accurate. So if you do have some information about this, do let me know. But I do sort of imagine that it's some sort of check where everybody jumps out of the bus and they scan it, see if there's anything under, see if there's any you know, anything that shouldn't be in the country, and then it basically turns its corner and off it goes. And something else that I thought was really quite cool, and something that actually happened in the last episode too, is that looking on Google Earth, I can see this thing. I can see the structure, and I was like, alright, cool, I might try and get a bit more information by scrolling down to Street View, and then as soon as I scroll down to Street View, it disappears. And it's obviously something that's only recently being constructed, so Street View hasn't been updated quite as much as Google Earth. There's been quite a lot of that actually flying around El Paso and Juarez. There's been a lot of construction, I guess, over the last few years. I know there's a lot of people from El Paso following this series, so do let me know. Has there been quite a lot of construction over the last few years in El Paso? Because I'm noticing quite a lot when I fly over in Google Earth that their structures are very different to when I actually go back down to Street View. I actually got a really cool surprise that when I was flying over El Paso and then I went down to Street View, all of a sudden there's a tram line. I was like, what? I didn't see that before. And as you kind of scroll further and further in, you can actually see it being constructed. So I guess there's a tram now in El Paso. I know that I've seen pictures of a really old tram that even used to go over the border and transported people from Juarez to El Paso. So, you know, obviously it must have been something that was torn up at one stage and then it's been rebuilt. Sydney actually did exactly the same thing. We had a fantastic tram network 50 years ago, and then they tore it all up and replaced it with buses, and now it's obviously being massively regretted because we're bringing it back. So we're like slowly building back our tram network, and it's now the light rail. And I'm not sure if that's the same terminology in El Paso, if you guys are calling it the light rail or not. But it is actually something I'm going to be including in Las Palmas. I'll be including some sort of light rail as well, and won't have the most extensive network, pretty much only primarily be around the downtown and going into some of the suburbs. But I think that'd be a really great way to transport people from, you know, around the city, because there won't be any train network besides an interstate train and a lot of cargo that'll be going in and out. But in terms of passenger services, I think that'll be very nicely covered by a tram or a light rail service. But again, talking about other things that I'm not doing on screen, which is, you know, just a classic case of what I do. And pretty much I've just been decorating this area with props and trees. I didn't really want to place down too many buildings around here. There's no residential. This is all, I guess, office blocks. And, you know, it's just this area that is sort of in transit. Like, nobody is really hanging out here unless they're working in administration or they're crossing the border. So I'm trying to either create areas that are really nicely presented, you know, like trees and planters and parks. And then there's other areas that are just sort of left because they're either industrial or they're you know, just areas that haven't been kind of recreated into some sort of park or office area, which is what I'm doing right now. This is just like a random garden area that's not exactly reclaimed by nature, but it's just left. It's just like a left area. And then other areas they're actually kind of created into much nicer parks and things like that, and walkways for people who are you know, working around this area. And this is not actually based on this is not based on Mexico at all. This is purely my own working out, you know, just filling in the gaps. Many years of experience with this game, I guess, using props to pretty up areas. And now I'm going back in and I'm placing down some of these really cool assets created by Kono. Kono created a cool border crossing kit, and you know, they work really nicely. They don't exactly fit for Mexico, unfortunately. Like I said, they use Nexus instead of Sentry, which is fine because, you know, it's fictional, so we can handle it. I'm sure you guys can handle it. And you can see on top of the building, there's a really cool Mexico sign, "Welcome to Mexico." That was created, the image was created by that bloke Will, who's created a lot of signs for my series. He's super talented. Yeah, he's awesome. I hope he creates some billboards for us. And that Evan created them into the billboard props that you can see, which is, you know, bloody awesome. He's awesome. He's very, very awesome. There's a couple of other signs that you'll see me place down too that, you know, I've got two variations of "Welcome to Las Palmas" and "Welcome to Mexico" that that bloke Will created, which is really cool. You'll see me place down another one very shortly after. And I'm just going through and just adding a couple of bits of detail that I think I might have left out. You actually probably noticed me use traffic precedents to restrict some of the access to vehicles as well. That was so that trucks only go into the truck area and the buses only go in the bus area. We don't really have any buses going through yet. That's something that I do need to subscribe to or get from the workshop. There's no Mexican buses. That'll be something I think would be very cool for somebody to make if you're interested in creating something like that. The Mexican, well, actually the Latin American buses just in general are just out of control amazing. They've got these amazing colors and they're super old. I know I went to Bolivia a few years ago, and I know it's not Mexico, but still a very similar style with massively bright colors and really old school buses, like from like the 70s. They're super old, but they're just these incredible vehicles, and I think that'll make such great assets to the workshop. So, you know, hint hint, anybody who's interested, please, that'll make such a great addition to this series. And at the moment I'm just placing down this truck stop. This is something that is completely ripped off Mexico. I've just noticed it sitting next to the border. Figured I should totally include it because I think it makes a nice little complete picture. It's a great little addition. It's very random, like I don't really know exactly its usage. I guess it's a truck stop, but you know, I don't really know how these things work. It's just purely going off the aesthetics of it all. And as we're starting to finish up this episode, I'm just going to look at my notes and check what I missed out on talking about. I got rid of all the snow. A lot of people are saying that it doesn't snow in El Paso, so yeah, I must have just seen one random picture of snow and just figured it snows there. So I deleted that. You know, it's kind of cool to like have my own thing going on, but also they weren't really working that well anyway. They were a bit glitchy. But anyway guys, that is pretty much it for this episode. Thanks so much for tuning in. I've really loved putting this series together, and I've really loved how much you guys have enjoyed it and jumping on board. So thank you so much for all the positive feedback. I love it. It's really awesome. Next episode, I'm going to be working on the residents of Mexico. I'll be placing down a whole ton of buildings, some resident buildings made by Beard Monkey. They're going to be on the workshop pretty soon, so get excited for that. I'm really excited to be showing you what he's created because he's just super talented and created the best looking assets ever. Thanks everybody who's been jumping onto Patreon. That is just out of control amazing. Your support is incredible, so thanks so much for that. If you ever want to check me out on any of my social platforms, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, that's it. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one. See you later.